What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. I'm your host, Chris Raybon of the Action Network, and this is your NFL Conference Championship Week preview. We will talk about our favorite sides, totals, props, money lines, everything you could think about, and of course, crack open our Sunday six-pack of Against the Spread bets with the help of my co-host, the Prime Minister of Degenerate Nation, Stuck. What's going on?
Oh, what's going on, brother? Yeah, it was a fun week, not for betting on here. I guess
I think it's first 0-6, right? First 0
and I think in 3 years. So we were, I guess, overdue. I mean, you're gonna have variance in some weekends. I would play the Ravens. I would play. I played some game too and had a future, but first half, I would play that a million times. There was a punt return touchdown. It's arguably the greatest playoff defensive performance, one of them in NFL history. I mean, they didn't allow the Texans to cross the 27-yard line, and they gave up 3 offensive points. So yeah, that was completely dominant. We'll talk about, I played San Fran, bad call there. But Debo going down, man, that is going to be, some of the numbers with and without him are really bad. And then I just had an awful call on Godwin. They were rotating the safety over to him, and then they just were feeding, and then Evans just destroyed Sutton all day. So that didn't play out how I wanted. But as I always say, who cares what happened last week? Last week was last week. We're on to Conference Championship weekend, which is it's super fun storylines. It's the first AFC Championship and NFC. Well, the first championship games took place 53 years ago in San Fran and Baltimore, which is where we're at now. This is the first time the AFC Championship game won't be played in Kansas City since 2017. 6 straight AFC title for the Chiefs, who were 3-2 in the previous 5. First home AFC champion for someone who used to have season tickets. Never saw multiple Super Bowls. First home AFC Championship game for the Ravens in franchise history, and the first NFC Championship game for the Lions since 1991. So a lot of fun storylines. I think we're in store for I think we got 2 pretty good matchups from what we could have got. The Bills, unfortunately, couldn't get there for my 50-1. We'll talk about that game a little bit more when we break down Chiefs Ravens, but it was sad to see AJ Klein in there for 60 snaps getting abused the entire game. I think guy was getting ready to go on vacation. So yeah, we'll talk about that game a little longer, but hopefully the Ravens can get through and get to the Super Bowl for my future.
Yeah, it should be a good weekend. I have a lot of thoughts on both of these games, so we'll get right into it, into our 6-pack. And for this week, same as last week, we have to choose a side or total. The others can be props. Stuck, you're up 73-66 still. And let me just give everyone the lines for the 2 games before we jump into the 6-pack. You have the Chiefs at the Ravens. Ravens favored by 3.5. That's the AFC title game. The total 44.5. That's 3 p.m. Eastern. And then Lions at Niners at 6:30 Eastern. Niners favored by 7. The total is 51. All right. Now it's time for our Conference Championship Sunday 6-pack.
Thirsty for action? Let's crack open the Sunday 6-pack.
All right. For my first pick and the first overall of the Conference Championship Sunday 6-pack, I'm going with the Ravens first half -2.5. And hopefully we get 1 out of 2 here. I know you were on this last week, but I think that with the Ravens kind of coming out slow last week, they were a little bit unprepared for the blitz. I think now, the rust is knocked off. I'd be surprised if they come out slow for a second week in a row. Baltimore, first in the NFL in first half point differential, plus 12.6. Second in the league in home first half point differential at plus 15.1. That's over 12 points better than Kansas City on the road, which Kansas City is a pretty good road differential of +3 in the first half. But Baltimore's just been ridiculous. And I just like the matchup for the Ravens. This is far and away the best pass defense the Chiefs have faced. They're number one in DVOA. Joe Thuney looks like he's going to be out with a pec injury. The guard on KC's line, who is one of the top guards, one of the top interior linemen in the game. And Kansas City's tackles have been really shaky. Smith and Taylor. The interior has been good, but Joe Thuney's a big part of that. So, number one graded pass blocker out of all guards at PFF, top 10 guard overall out of 78 qualifiers. And then when I look at, Lamar going up against this Kansas City defense, I think they'll be prepared for the blitz. Spag's always going to have something up his sleeve, but I think they'll be more prepared for the blitz. Kansas City can cover some of their receivers, but Kansas City 27th in DVOA against the run. I think Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, Lamar will be able to run the football. And then, on the other side of the ball, again, I just don't think Kansas City with, a weakened offensive line, with a defense that can man up Rashee Rice. I mean, I'll let you kind of speak to what you think they're going to do with Kelsey. Is it going to be Hamilton? Humphrey looks like he's going to be back. So he's a guy who can play inside, outside. So he'd be perfect for Rice. You could kind of stick him on Rice and play man coverage. And that was always going to be, I think, Kansas City's kryptonite when they got to the playoffs, was a defense that can play man-to-man coverage, still get pressure. Baltimore, I believe they led the league in sacks, still get pressure and man these guys up on the back end and be able to handle them. Baltimore can do that. The Buffalo Bills, a lot more zone heavy. Miami, their defense was decimated. So this is going to be a real different test, I think, for Kansas City than they've faced all year, because now you're combining this good defense with an offense that can play ball control on the other side. And we know that Lamar, Harbaugh have been great in the first half, especially. Lamar, 51, 29-2 career first half against the spread, covering by an average of 2.5 points per game. Harbaugh, super huge sample, 160 and 110 with 9 pushes, 59% against the spread in his career in the first half, regular and postseason. And this year, Lamar Jackson, 13-4 in his starts. The Ravens are 13-4 against the spread in the first half, 77%, covering by nearly 6 points per game. And they have not lost 2 straight first halves against the spread all season. So, last week you mentioned it, got the kick return and just came out sluggish, slow, rusty, weren't quite prepared for the blitz. I think they'll come out sharp this week, and maybe you'll see a repeat of, Chiefs voodoo. Ravens, like you said, they tend to play with their food. So I think this might be one where it gets a little dicey later, but I'm expecting the Ravens to start fast this one. So give me Baltimore -2.5 in the first half.
Yeah. I like this one. As soon as the lines came out, for anyone that follows me in the app, I played the Ravens -165 in the money line. This late in the season, I rarely, to find a money line that I thought was that far off is pretty crazy. I make this line between 4.5 and 5, and my fare for money line is north of 200. So when I look at this matchup, the Ravens have been historically dominant this year. You can go by any advanced metric. You mentioned DVOA. They have the highest weighted DVOA, which looks at recent performances, headed into this round of any team since 1980. 11 of the other top 13 teams all got to the Super Bowl. Interestingly enough, the only two teams to prevent those two that didn't get to the Super Bowl were Mahomes against the Bills, because they couldn't squib kick it. And then the Ravens actually beat the New England Patriots back in 2012 en route to their Super Bowl win.
So was that the Billy Cundiff?
No, that's when the Ravens beat them. That's when they beat Brady.
That was the one when the Ravens went to face the Niners, right?
Yep, and then beat the Niners.
Flacco year. Okay. Yeah.
So can the Chiefs win this game? Absolutely. I make this line like 4.5. So you're talking like I think they win this game a third of the time. they have the best quarterback on the planet. We could run through all the underdog stats for the Chiefs, and when Mahomes is an underdog or a favorite of 3 or less, the same thing holds true for Lamar Jackson. And one of the best things that what I'm really looking forward to in this game is just the X's and O's. So like first of all, it's one football game, so you get a fluke turnovers, 4th down variance, fumble luck, and then also just like an amazing game plan. And that just completely changes the game that one team isn't expecting. And I think the Ravens have a better chance of doing that. You look at what they've done with their staff this year, and I have nothing but respect for Reed and Spagnuolo, but the adjustments that they've made based on their opponent on a week-to-week basis. And look, they have an extra day and a half here. They're way more well-rested. They're way healthier. You're going to get Mark Andrews back. Might get Marlon Humphrey back. He practiced in full today. So they're just like almost fully healthy across the board. And it's just a really good matchup. So people have to forget what the Ravens have done this year. They went 8-2 against playoff teams. They won by an average of 170 points. Yeah, the average score was 31-14. Their last seven home games were all against teams that finished above 500. They won by an average score of 38-17. They played 10 home games this year. They were all against teams above 500, which is insane. They had a better offense, a better defense, better special teams than the Chiefs, with a much tougher schedule in the best division in football, a division where everyone finished above 500 for the first time in 60, 70 years. I forget the exact date. The Chiefs' first playoff teams, on the other hand, 3-4. They had a net scoring margin of plus 13. They won by an average of 21-19. And I think that there's a little bit of recency bias on, okay, it's Mahomes and he's the GOAT. Of what they've done the last 2 weeks, they beat a Dolphins team that was completely decimated. Destroyed by injuries, specifically on the defensive end, but also somewhat on offense. And then they play the Bills last week. And you mentioned, how the Bills play. There's a couple key injuries, and I would have played the Bills at -2.5 if I wasn't worried about the injuries. And I'm glad I didn't, because that's what came to fruition. With all the injuries at linebacker, pregame and then during the game, you got to play AJ Klein. AJ Klein was getting absolutely destroyed out there. And the Chiefs intelligently just went heavy, and they just put their linebackers in the sauce. And these linebackers that were not even playing all year, and they were exhausted. They had no depth, and they just went heavy. They went 12, 13 personnel, and they just cooked them over the middle of the field. And that was the difference in the game. So, and also I think one key piece that we didn't really talk about is Gabe Davis being out, because in this match, when you look at the Chiefs, their defense was really good this year. And so I think that I guess I'll get into my first pick and then keep rambling. But so my first pick in the second overall, the Sunday 6-pack, is Ravens Chiefs under 44.5. I'm going to wait to see if 45 pops and see where the market goes, but doesn't matter for this contest. These were both these teams were 1-2 in scoring defense this year. Ravens allowed 16.5 points per game. Chiefs right around 17.3. I don't think the Chiefs get enough credit for what their defense can and did do this season. I mean, you're talking about a team that over the last 7 games, they allowed 4.1 points per game in the second half. So not only are they good, but they are making ridiculous adjustments at the half. Same with the Ravens. That'll be an awesome chess match to watch. You saw what the Ravens did last week. More quicker passes. They adjusted the blitz and then just came out and just destroyed the Texans. But, so I like this under because we have to remember this Chiefs offense, which was held to under 21 or fewer points, I think 10 times in the regular season. They had no explosiveness all year. We talked about how often they were broken. And now just because they played, a beat-up Dolphins D, a beat-up Bills D, by the way, on a short week, they kind of got shafted in that sense as well. I don't think everything is fixed. It's like you have to – it's Pacheco runs really hard, and we'll see if his turf toe flares up. But it's not an elite rushing attack. It's the middle of the pack if you look at any advanced metric. And I don't think that they're going to shred the Ravens on the ground. They have to play like in a box. There's no explosiveness. Ravens don't give up explosive pass plays. They have to play over the middle of the field. Dolphins didn't have linebackers. Bills didn't have linebackers. It was just a perfect setup for the Chiefs. the Ravens are perfectly set up with all their linebackers, with all their safeties. You know, you get Hamilton in the slot now. You can play heavy nickel. You can play nickel most of the game here. And Ravens historically elite defense when in nickel this year. The way to beat the Ravens this year, they have the Ravens have, and look, like I said, they've been historically dominant this year, just destroying every team that they've played. There's like two weaknesses on their team. It's, I would say on defense, if you can get them out of nickel and then throw on them. That's what the Rams kind of did. Because their corners aren't great. Their corners, and I mean, if you look at Darby's like top 5 in yards per reception allowed, top 5 in reception rate this year. Humphrey's obviously still elite. We'll see how healthy he is. But, you know, Mollett, he's grading out really well. You know, their safeties, Brandon Stevens, their corners are not elite. But Mike McDonald doesn't ask them to do much in this scheme. They don't have to do much underneath. They're not asked to do much. But if you can get them in base, you get Hamilton, who's just probably the best playmaker on defense in the NFL. Now, if you can get him off the field, out of the slot, and you have to play with another linebacker, and then you throw on them, that's really where they've shown some weaknesses in a couple of games this year. But I mean, the Chiefs, I think the Ravens, especially with Humphrey and his physicality and Hamilton, you can stay in nickel most of this game, if not, you know, a majority of it. You're not going to play it the entire game. But even if the Chiefs did that, like who are they throwing to? Right? It's not like they have these. It's not like you have Kupp and Nakua on the outside to take advantage of some of the Ravens' corners if you can get enough time. So I just don't see. I think this Chiefs offense is going to look how it has for most of the year when it wasn't playing the best defense in the NFL. We're going to talk about the Niners a little bit. The Niners with a healthy Deebo Samuel lost one game this year. They scored 27 or more in every game. They scored 12 before Sam Darnold had a garbage drive against the Ravens D. The Texans destroyed the second best defense in the NFL, the Browns, the week before. Didn't score an offensive touchdown last week against the Ravens. So, like, this defense is very good. They can get pressure without blitzing. And the way that they're getting pressure, I mean, it's unbelievable. Matabuke he's going to get absolutely paid. But how they're blowing up certain guards and you know, just like blocking, they're like blocking offensive linemen to free up. But their pressure schemes, their simulated pressures are amazing. They don't have to go cover 0 blitz, cover 1 blitz here. You don't want to all out blitz Mahomes. Don't expect them to do that. They'll bring it a couple times to keep Mahomes honest, but they can cover the middle of the field. And, you know, they have multiple guys that can cover Kelsey. Number one, their linebackers will be okay there. You can have Hamilton on them at sometimes. You can have Humphrey on them at times. And their corners are perfectly equipped to cover the receivers on the outside. And this Chiefs offense, we talked about all year. Why do they struggle? Their tackles have been bad. Penalties, too. You know, the holdings, the false starts. And now you're taking away Joe Thuney in the interior. I know Aguilera. I always forget how to pronounce his name. Nick Allegretti.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he's played before. I think he's really at center, but it's a big drop off. It's not massive, but it's a big drop off, and it's a big drop off when you're going up against this defense with all the stunts, simulated pressures on, you know, in a loud environment, and this
on the road,
on the road, and this Chiefs offensive line has had continuity all year. And it's been one of the strengths. That interior has had continuity, helps with some of the issues at tackle. But if you can get pressure up the middle on Mahomes, that's his kryptonite, right? You get pressure and you're not blitzing up the middle. So I think the Ravens are going to be able to do that here. And they're perfectly equipped to cover the Chiefs on the back end. So I don't see the Chiefs offense having much success here. It's still Mahomes. Mahomes is still going to make plays. It's the best quarterback on planet Earth, but we've seen this offense, don't fall into recency bias, look completely pedestrian for long stretches of the season, and they weren't playing against the best defense in the NFL. On the other side of the ball, so I think the Chiefs, because of the last 2 weeks playing beat up defenses, people are just like, oh, Mahomes, the offense is back, Kelsey's back. This offense has issues. It still does. The tackles, the wide receivers aren't great. Now you're missing Thuney in the middle. And, you know, the Ravens are getting Humphrey back. On the other side, you know, Ravens getting Andrews back, which is big, but the Chiefs, this is like number one, they don't play a ton of zone, right? So it was one of the things that the Ravens have destroyed zone all year. So that's working. That works for them, and they will blitz, and that's what you need to do to Mahomes. You can't blitz incessantly. Excuse me. That's what you need to do to Jackson, just to try to throw him off. But you can't sit back and then play zone. How they decide to spy him is going to be interesting. I don't like. Do they try to use Willie Gay as a spy? Do they try to use a safety at times? Because you can't spying Jackson is dumb, in my opinion. You want to spy him just like for a little bit, and then you got to get after him. He's just too fast. It doesn't like you're spying him. You're wasting a defender. The Steelers, the Browns have done this really well. They'll like just spy for a little bit and then send the linebacker. So I'm really curious to see how the Chiefs handle that. But they have L'Jarius Sneed, who's been one of the best corners in the NFL on the outside for Flowers. You have McDuffie, who's been one of the best slots in the NFL. And look, this is a defense that, like I said, is number 2 scoring defense in the NFL. Their adjustments have been great. I think that they'll have a good blitz game plan. So I don't think that the Ravens are going to put up 35-38 here. There are 2 weaknesses of this Chiefs defense by far. Number 2 receivers, they're, I think, 24th DVOA against number 2 receivers. And then against the run, they're number 27. You could throw to your running backs a bit too. But specifically, they're one of the worst defenses in the NFL against runs out of the shotgun and then just straight power runs. So this will probably lead into, I think, one of your picks. But so this is like a big Gus Edwards game. And he should just be able to, 4-5 yards every carry. And they should be able to run out of shotgun, out of just power against this Chiefs run D that's extremely vulnerable. And then it's up to, Bateman or Odell on the other side. And to
Aguilar too. Is this Aguilar? Aguilar's probably the best guy against man coverage.
Yeah, but he'll be in the slot. He'll be in the slot.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So then you're going up against McDuffie. Might get some other, the Chiefs will have four D-backs covering because you could have like Likely or Andrews out. You could use McDuffie there. So I'm curious to see what they do. But that number, the quick passing to whoever's that number 2, and then Bateman and Beckham are your breakaway receivers, right? You're like, okay, they can get separation against, it's not Snead or McDuffie. So when Lamar buys time, hitting a big play to them. So, I'll give people a same game parlay that I'm going to put in myself of how I see this playing out. Something with, so Ravens money line under, if it doesn't get up to 45, I'll just do an all under like 45.5. Ravens money line. I'm going to go Bateman over, like, you can go like over 19.5 receiving yards. He's taken Beckham's snaps last week. He basically just took them all, and that's because he will actually run block. So you could get it could change this week. They could like to match up with Beckham, but Bateman will actually run block and Beckham just won't. So and I think that they want to run here. You want to stay balanced, but Bateman will actually try to run block. So I think he's going to get a decent amount of snaps at the number 2 receiver. And something with Gus Edwards. So maybe a Gus Edwards, like over rushing yards, which you're going to talk about, or anytime touchdown. Like if they're anywhere near the 4, you're just going to go and shotgun hand to him and he's going to score.
So the reason I like your under 2 is because, and maybe even first half under especially, because obviously, you already broke down why the Ravens want to come out and run the ball. And the interesting thing is, on the other side though, right? Because the Ravens, like, really their only weakness on defense has been early down runs because they love to stay in those light fronts. They don't like to go
they play light
into base. So, since week 10, they are one of the worst teams in EPA and success rate against the run on early downs. If you include week 18, they're actually bottom 3, but that, they weren't playing for real that week, but they're still, let's see, what is it? 25th? Yeah. 25th against early down runs in terms of EPA. And 20th in EPA, 25th in early down rush success rate at 41% since week 10. So I think the Chiefs are going to kind of run it back with, Noah Gray, Blake Bell, and try to run the ball and see if the Ravens do get out of base. But I think that's going to kind of, bleed the clock because the Ravens are going to want to do the same thing on the other side. So I think you have both teams coming
Ravens
out
are
here
slow. Ravens
wanting
are slow.
to run.
Chiefs aren't necessarily fast either.
Yeah. So you're going to have two teams coming out that want to run. And then I totally agree with you on with Jarius Sneed, one of my favorite corners in the league, going up against Flowers. I actually crunched the numbers because I need to do this to kind of adjust my projections, for these kind of situations. Kansas City against number one wide receivers, the top 5 in DVOA, but I actually ran the numbers on their actual rate stats. So I looked at the wide receiver ones they faced and then how those wide receiver ones did against everyone else. So essentially, Kansas City against wide receiver ones, target per route run rate drops 4% from 22% versus KC, 26% against everyone else. Your catch rate drops 13%, 68% versus everyone else, 55% versus KC, and their yard per reception, 2.5 yards per reception less, 10.4 against KC, 12.9 versus everyone else. So, that's pretty massive. And, I'm talking Amon-Ra St. Brown, Ridley, DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, Justin Jefferson, Sutton, Keenan Allen, Tyreek, AJ Brown, Devontae, Chris Watson, Diggs, Adams again, Chase, Diggs, Hill, like all the wide receiver ones they face, just ridiculous coverage. So, that kind of plays exactly into what you said about it's probably going to have to be someone else and not Zay Flowers to have to do it. But Zay Flowers, obviously their most explosive receiver. So there's a lot of things that point to the under, especially I think early in the game where both teams are going to be able to run. I do think the Ravens are going to get a lead, and then, it's all bets are off. Both of these quarterbacks can create out of structure. But that was kind of my thoughts on the under. So I think that's a really smart call as well.
Yeah. And I'll just throw out my second pick of the conference championship 6-pack and third overall is I'm going Zay Flowers under 4.5 catches. So I prefer that to yards. We talked about his catch rate. Sneed's a very aggressive corner. And he can kind of, body him up at the line of scrimmage, throw off his timing. He's allowed 47 catches on 93 targets, which is elite in 18 games. It's like 2.5. And he's playing the number one most of the time. And I expect him to do so here. That's like, and even if you put Flowers in the slot sometimes, you're going up against an elite slot corner. So, like, I don't think that Flowers is going to have many advantageous matchups here, but he's allowing like 2.5 catches on 5 targets, mainly against number one receivers against over 18 games. The other thing is that because he's super aggressive, like I think he probably leads the league in pass deflections. Don't quote me on that. Passes defense. He gets a ton of penalties. So I think he leads all corners in penalties. So I think he has 17 penalties. So there's a chance that, Lamar buys time, Flowers gets behind the defense, hits a big play, and that, he could have a 60, 70 yard touchdown. There's also a chance that, and this wouldn't hurt the yards or catches, that he gets behind him and Snead is playing aggressive and there's a big PI, which would help the Ravens, but obviously wouldn't help any. He's getting like one a game, Snead, one penalty a game, which would could take away a catch. So yeah, I think that, and the Ravens are going to go run heavy here. You have Andrews back. And if you look at Flowers' target share when Andrews was in, a lot of noise, but that goes down against the types of defenses that the Chiefs plays. Target share goes down. So, I like under 4.5 catches for Flowers. So, if I'm putting a single game parlay together just to have some fun on Sunday, it'd be like Ravens money line under 45.5 all, Flowers under catches, Bateman over like 19.5 yards, something with Gus Edwards, maybe a touchdown or over rushing yards, But before you have something with Gus Edwards. I'll post what I end up playing, but that's how I'm kind of thinking this plays out. Good Gus Edwards game, number 2 receiver for Ravens. A lot of quick passes against the blitz. Ravens are able to control the clock. I think it's a lower scoring defensive game. It's like I think this ends up like I'm confident the Ravens win, but look, it all takes us. This is what people don't understand. It takes one possession to go wrong. It takes one fumble, and it's still Patrick Mahomes. But I think this ends up being like 24-17 Ravens. 24, I think 23-17. I could even say. What the difference is that both of these defenses are really good. Really good. Chiefs defense is extremely underrated and actually matches up pretty well with the Ravens. Ravens defense also matches up really well with the Chiefs offense. But the Ravens defense is better. Ravens special teams slightly better. Ravens more well-rested, healthier, at home. Little extra time to prepare for this. Their coordinator's been great. They've blown out every team. The difference is the Ravens offense all year has been great. The Chiefs offense is not. There's a reason why the Chiefs are only averaging 21 points per game. Ravens 28. You look at against winning teams, the Ravens have a much tougher schedule too. So I think that's the difference. The Ravens will be able to sustain drives a little bit more consistently, and they will win this game. Mahomes won't make it easy, but this team has just shown over and over again. We have a whole. And if you want to just take the points of Mahomes now, I think it's probably going to go to 4 if it's not there already. You want to take the points of Mahomes? I wouldn't argue with you. And you just say I have the greatest quarterback on the planet. I've made that bet many times with the points. That's fine. And I think this line is getting close to fair now. But we have a whole data set of who these teams are, and I think the Ravens should be like 4.5-ish point favorites here.
Yeah, I mean their record against, and not even their record, their point differential against playoff teams is just absurd. I mean, every good team they face pretty much blew them out of the water, multiple scores. But this is football. This is football porn because there's so many good coaches, and schemers in this. So I'm just telling you, like I bet the Ravens money line because I like some of the matchups. My numbers said to bet them money line and I would have bet -2.5, -3. So if it comes back down with Mahomes money, -3 is fine. But I'm telling you, I've seen this with brilliant coaches and brilliant coordinators in huge games like this, that just they could come up with a scheme or a wrinkle that either controls the game or just forces a couple key mistakes and changes the whole game. So I'm so looking forward to just the obviously the quarterbacks are great, the defenses are great. But I'm just looking forward to the chess match and the schematic battle of what these teams do, and that's the other thing is that the Ravens obviously, I think, have the most complete roster in the NFL. You could argue right there with the 49ers, but 49ers offensive line has some issues. But it's what the coaches have done. It's what their game plans have been on a weekly basis against these good teams that has set them apart. And that Spagnuolo is going to have a good game plan. Reed's going to have some tricks up his sleeve. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this game just from a football perspective. But I like the Ravens. I like the under, and I like Zay Flowers under receptions. Yeah, so that kind of leads into my next 2 picks. They're both in this game, so I'll give them out both. I'll talk Gus in a second, but I'm going to go with that for my third pick just because it's an over. And I got an under that I like more because I generally like unders more. But so for my second pick and I guess 4th overall, really 3rd overall, but whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm going with Lamar Jackson under a half an interception. And I like this up to -150. I think that's where the fair value should be. It's at -120. -125 across the industry right now. So Lamar Jackson has not thrown a pick in 65% of his games this season, 11 of 17. And he's had 27 or fewer pass attempts in 10 of 17 games. Now, we both already talked about how we think that this is a matchup that sets up Baltimore well to come out run heavy. Kansas City is a run funnel defense, number 5 in DVOA against the pass, 27th against the run. Lamar finished top 5, and he's top 5 right now, in lowest interception rate among qualified quarterbacks at just a hair under 1.5%, which is right around what he's been doing for his whole career. And Kansas City, as good as their pass defense has been, they really haven't been able to make a ton of plays on the ball. They're 1.42% interception rate, 4th lowest in the league. They've not secured an interception in 63% of their games, or 12 out of 19. And this is not the old Kansas City of years past where their offense was just lighting people up, and so opponents had to throw against them. Opponents are averaging just under 33 pass attempts per game against the Chiefs this year, or did so in the regular season, and that's 23rd. So you got Lamar in a situation where I don't think he's going to have to attempt a lot of passes. We think the Ravens will be in positive game script. He's already not attempted many passes, very low interception rate. Defense has a very low interception rate. So you put it all together, and I'm projecting just over a 60% chance of him not throwing a pick in this game. So I like anything minus 150 or under for Lamar not to throw a pick here.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I like the Ravens to win, so which would obviously lead into that as well with a lower scoring game. We'll get to you in a second. NFC people listening to like Detroit fans waited since 1991 to get the NFC Championship game, and they're like, "Are we going to talk about our game?"
Right. I mean, and we'll get into that one, but that one, I mean, there's actually more to talk about because there's a little bit more uncertainty there. But for my third pick of the conference championship 6-pack, I'm going with Gus Edwards over 39.5 rushing yards. And this is pretty much the bottom of the market for Gus. And I might have contributed to it because early in the week, Sean and I were talking on the pod on the Fantasy Flex, and I was saying, hey, last week, one of my dart throw was Justice Hill. And I was like, any given week, Justice Hill ended up being their feature back. You just never know. And it kind of happened last week. But what I didn't realize, and I saw a tweet from, I think, Pro Football Network, that Gus was actually getting his hand looked at. So he came out of the game early in the fourth quarter.
I heard you listen. I heard the Fantasy Flex, and I was going to tell you this, that he actually outsnapped. He had 10 carries to Hill's 9 in the third. They looked at his hand, and then they just precautionary kept him out for the fourth quarter because there's no reason to put him back in. So I'm glad you brought
exactly. So I think, and it doesn't seem like the books are kind of just going off like last game too. So they've been lowering his prop. I think I saw it at like 41, 40. People probably have been hitting the under, just thinking, it's a toss up. Maybe Dalvin Cook is going to get more involved. He had 8 carries last week. But to your point, when Gus left the game last week, Gus had 10, Justice had 8, Cook had 0. That is pretty much in line with what we would normally expect for the carry share between Gus and Hill, which is Gus around 55, 60%, Hill 35, 40%, and then Cook was essentially just kind of filling in for the Gus role. So really it's more like 18-13, but so I have it kind of back where I would have initially had it before last week, which is Gus getting about 55% of the backfield carries, which is still conservative. He gets more than that sometimes, but so I have his rushing yardage in the above 45. So I like anything up to 43.5 for this one. If you can't get that, I would suggest going with a little bit of a longer shot, because I think you and I both agree that this could be a big Gus game. So if you can't get the median, maybe go for a 60 plus, 80 plus, or even 100 plus if you want to get crazy. Because again, this Kansas City defense is bottom 6 against the run. They just lost an interior defender, I believe, in Nadi. I think he's banged up. I don't think he's going to play, but I think this is a power run game, and this kind of sets up for a big Gus game. They're a favorite. They should start faster than last week, because last week they didn't really get to do much. I mean, it was just like ugly in the first half. So, it was like one step forward, two steps back. So, Gus could get this over 39.5. I mean, if things go right, he could get this by halftime. He could easily pop an explosive. I think the Chiefs are still going to have to kind of, guard against the pass and Lamar Jackson running. And so Gus is going to have a lot of opportunities here. And he's had 40 or more yards in all but 5 of his games this season. And then he's had 48 or more in 11 of 18. Oh, wait, no. If he played 19 games, right? So that's 12 of 19. 12 of 19, he's had at least 48. So I think he is a really good bet to hit the over 39. I think it's really good up to 43.5 because you're looking essentially for, 11 carries, 44 yards. I think he can average more than 4 yards a carry, but and that's kind of where I would personally bet it to. But we've already talked about it. Love Gus, sets up as a big Gus game. And I don't think people realize that the reason he came out was more precautionary and that like this is not the true carry split going forward. It's pretty much what it has been in the past, which is, Gus about 60-40 over the, Hill, and maybe Cook mixes in for a couple of snaps too. But
yeah.
Like
and
Gus
the specific runs that the Chiefs struggle against, which is like shotgun power, all of those, Gus is exponentially better than Justice Hill in those runs. So the run types that I think the Ravens want to use here, I think they're going to want to use Gus even more. So that run split could grow even wider.
Yeah, to your point, he averages 4.5 yards per carry under in shotgun this season, 3.8 under center. So if we get some shotgun runs, that would be even better for this prop because more than half of his runs have been under center. But yeah, I think either way, I think he gets over this. It's been all but 5 games he's had at least 40. So yeah.
So for my third pick and the 6th overall, the Championship Sunday 6-pack, I'm going with Arik Armstead over 0.25 sacks. You can find this plus 145 out there. This is, I thought it's, we only have 3 football games left. Well, there'll be 2 at the time this happens. So I figured we'd get a little weird with a defensive prop, but a lot of reasons why I like this. One, pressure rate has gone through the roof when the entire defensive line is healthy for San Francisco. And that happened again last week. Sacks weren't there, but the pressure rate was. Also, during the regular season, EPA with Armstead on the field, negative 0.14. That's elite. Plus 0.02 without him. Still very good, but not extremely elite. And they did it last. I think they got pressure on like 42% of Love's dropbacks, and they weren't even blitzing. And that's against a very good offensive line. Major key here, though, is no Jonah Jackson. That's a huge loss. Frank Ragnall's also beat up. I mean, he's like
not good. Because now you're talking about interior pressure against Goff, which is
and Goff is not mobile, and he'll fall into the arms of multiple defenders here if they're getting pressure up the middle. Just look, the drop off. So there's a couple offensive line injuries. And by the way, I didn't even mention this with the Ravens. John Simpson's the weak point of their offensive line. So like, can Chris Jones create a play? That's something else to watch there. I mean, he basically won the Bills game by getting to Josh Allen. But there's a couple offensive line, like interior injuries, guys missing that could swing these games. With Tooney being out, likely we'll see. Even if he plays like a Peck, probably not going to be anywhere close.
I mean, the reports are he's going to be out. Like that.
Yeah, I think he's going to be out. Yeah. But I'm saying even if he tries to go, and then with Jonah Jackson, who's playing extremely well, it's not just the drop off is more extreme than what the Chiefs have to deal with, because I was sick of last week. 7 pressures on 28 pass blocking snaps.
Absurd.
That's bad. Jonah Jackson allowed 0 on 18. So, and now you're going hostile environment on the road. That continuity is gone. Like, there's going to be some stunts. And Armstead, he would have hit this. He played 10 games this season. He would have hit it in 5. He would have hit it in 6 of 10 postseason games. He has 7 sacks in 10 postseason games. And by the way, you don't need a full sack here. Just need a half,
sack. Yeah.
Yep. Also, trailing game. The game script is the Lions are most likely trailing, more pass attempts, more known passing downs. And so I think he's going to have Armstead usually shows up in these games. I think he's going to have plus matchups, and you have just an immobile Goff with interior pressure in a trailing game script. I think Armstead's going to have plenty of opportunities to get sacked. A lot of variance in a bet like this, but I think that just for him to get a half a sack at close to plus 150, I think the price should be a little lower. So I bet Armstead over 0.25 sacks, plus 145. And then when it comes to this game, curious to get your thoughts on it. So that like the Jackson injury looms super large because of like the San Francisco with their full defensive line arsenal now. And if you look at their numbers with everyone this year, because you remember then they added Chase Young and Armstead was hurt. But the difference between when they have their full arsenal of defensive linemen versus not is stark. Even, it's a lot of noise. Sample size isn't great, but it obviously makes sense why they would be so much better. You can't double, Bosa as much, and you have to worry about more elite guys, and their depth isn't great along the defensive line. And the good thing is Goff won't have to deal with much weather here. People are going to say it's outdoors, a little slower track, but it's not going to be wind, or so it doesn't really matter that much here. So that's good news for the Lions. On San Francisco's side, and I spent a lot of time on this is Deebo Samuel going to play? So, and if he does play, like how effective is he going to be? There's a lot of noise in these numbers, but and I'll go into that. But with Deebo, they have 70% win percentage. They're averaging about 27 points per game. It's over about 75 games. Rushing for about 140 yards, plus 8 turnover differential. Without him, they're 8-9, averaging about a field goal less, about 20 yards less, fewer rushing yards, and then -8 turnover differential. This year with him, with a full Deebo, they went 12-1, 32.3 points per game, got to at least 27 in every game. The only one they didn't was against Baltimore. Without him, or when he was limited, they went 1-4. They only averaged 19 points per game. They never eclipsed 24 points. They scored 17 3 times. They should have lost last week. They really should have been 0-5. Now, why there's some noise in there is the sample size isn't great, and also you had Trent Williams injury.
Trent Williams, it was like a cluster of injuries, and Purdy was. I don't know if he was like concussed or the after effects, but it was like he was dealing with injuries. Trent was dealing with injuries.
Yeah,
I think McCaffrey was even banged up in there. Like everyone got hurt at the same time. So it is.
But you've seen this in the past. But you've seen it in this past, and we just know. I mean, but last week, just look at the offense. I mean, he only played 10 snaps. He had 2 targets, at 30 yards. He's going to have a big day. And their offense changes. Their run game it's more dynamic. It's easy. It's harder to defend when he's in there. Obviously, he's a weapon, yards after catch. It makes their whole, offense so much more difficult to defend. So you're going to see a lot of numbers out there about the difference with him without. There's a lot of noise in there, and it's a bit inflated because of, Trent Williams is obviously the best left tackle in football. And without Trent Williams, their offensive line turns to dust. But it's obviously a major, major loss. He's super important in a number of different ways. So, I make this a little over 7. San Francisco, I think close to 7.5 point favorites here. I downgraded them after last week. The Deebo injury just gives me a little bit of pause because the Lions' run D is good, and it's been good.
Yeah, number 1 in DVOA.
Yeah, number 1 DVOA. They had a couple hiccups, but every offense or defense is going to have a couple hiccups in any facet during 19-20 games. So, I think what this will come down to, and especially if you don't have to worry about Samuel, can Purdy cook like every quarterback has been cooking against this Lions secondary over the past 6-7 weeks? They give up 350 yards every week, including last week. So from curious your thoughts on the side in total, and also does this lend itself? I think you mentioned this on the player projections episode. Check that out if you haven't. But this could be a big Ayuk game, similar to like all the number 1 receivers who have been going off. And do we potentially look at where do you have McCaffrey at? Like, because if the Lions can defend the run, I think Shanahan's probably going to come out here and throw like everyone is doing against the Lions. But then, it's your game script is most likely going to be up handing it to him. But I think I saw his player prop around 90, somewhere around there. I was like, I know he could break one at any time, but I feel like that's high against this Lions run D. Thinking about how this is going to play out, and then when you don't have Debo, the run offense isn't as dynamic, and it's a little easier to defend. But then he would maybe take some carries too. So I couldn't come to, and I'm not a prop expert, but I couldn't get there. And I thought about McCaffrey under. I thought about some Ayuk overs. But I never got there. So what are your thoughts on this game and any of those props or anything else?
Yeah, so the reason I have 3 picks from the Ravens-Chiefs game is because I don't want to lay the points not knowing what's going on with Debo yet. I wouldn't actually mind laying the 7 if Debo was in, just because, bounce back spot. I don't think the Lions could keep up with a healthy Niner offense. But now it creates such a like it's so tough because here's the issue with McCaffrey and the books, by the way. I think what they're doing for now is they kind of have Debo at 50-50, like 50, like half of his usual snaps. That's what I have him, and that's my numbers are pretty close to the books, so I'm guessing that's what they're doing too. But here's the issue, and I'll just kind of tell people like how to approach these things. If you're hearing this before we have gotten official word on Debo. So Christian McCaffrey played every snap last week. Unless there's an injury, safe to say he's going to do that again. Now, the thing is, in terms of design runs, Debo Samuel in a given game usually gets on average about 10% of the design runs, right? So McCaffrey would get about the other 90, they maybe have like
someone
another
else
wide receiver.
Get like one,
yeah, like a use check or somebody. But essentially, you're talking about like 88 to 90% for McCaffrey, and then you would have about 10% for Debo on a normal game. Now, the issue with Debo being in limbo is that, and the issue with betting McCaffrey unders is that, for example, right now I have him about 19 and a half carries for 90 yards. It's pretty much in line with the books, right? But if Debo is out, I don't necessarily like. I'll adjust. Maybe it's hard to adjust their pass rate up if Debo's out, right? I don't think they're going to throw more because he's out. That doesn't make sense. So if anything, you're going to keep your normal pass rate, or it's going to even go down. And now all those carries are essentially going to go to McCaffrey because they gave one to Jennings, but Shanahan came out and said that was an accident. He said like Jennings was just in the Debo spot, and he didn't alter the play call, and Purdy essentially called the play as if it was Debo, and it went to Jennings. So that's not going to happen again. So you're talking about McCaffrey getting potentially 22, 23 carries, which now you're even against a really tough defense. Now you're still projecting them, over at or over 100 yards. So if you think Debo is going to be out, I actually think the McCaffrey over has the value. And then the same thing for Ayuk. But it's a little dicier with Ayuk because you kind of mentioned it with the, kind of had our wires crossed a little with Godwin versus Evans, and they ended up rolling a safety over Godwin and winning Sutton, going Evans one-on-one. Well, if Debo's in, they probably do that same game plan. But if Debo's out, now you don't have to leave like Sutton on Ayuk one-on-one. Now you can like double, essentially roll like a safety over top of Ayuk, because everyone's going to be not everyone, but their corners are going to be able to handle Juwan Jennings and Conley and McLeod, or at least they'll feel comfortable with those guys in one-on-one. So now you're talking about...
You're going to say, let's not let Ayuk beat us deep.
Right. So
especially after what we saw last week with Evans.
Right. So the thing with Ayuk, I actually have him... I actually think it would be ideal if Debo was in for Ayuk, as crazy as that sounds. So...
Debo, basically what you're saying is Debo like impacts everything. If he's in or out from a prop perspective, it changes everything. Literally.
Yeah. So because also, I did the...
I think he's definitely worth like, he's one of the players that's
non-zero,
worth something to the spread. Yeah. So
right.
and you're around a key number. So that matters, especially when you're talking margins are thin. The edges are much smaller this time of the year. So it's not like he's worth 3 points or 7 points, but you're around a key number.
Probably half.
Yeah. Half to, I think I would say like between, a half and a point potentially. When you talk about his impact in the run game too. And, I think I would have him 0.65. I think I'd have him in, but that's not my specialty. So that's something around a key number. That's big too. So it impacts the spread. Like if the spread was 9, it wouldn't matter as much.
But at 7 on the dot, that's why it's been tough for me to, as we're sitting here recording this on Wednesday afternoon, it's tough for me to give out any recommendations. I mean, I think that's a good call on the Armstead. That's defensive, but it's tough for me to give out any recommendations as far as, which side to bet, the total. Cause I think, if we're talking no Debo, now you're probably going to either pass as much or less than you would before now you're going to run against a good Lion run defense. On the other side, the Lions can't, the Lions have some issues on their interior line against a really good defense that doesn't need to blitz to get pressure. So I'd be looking at an under. I think under 51 if Debo's out, if the before the books move it. So I think if you think Debo's more likely to miss, under 51 makes a lot of sense.
I initially liked, say both of these teams are at full strength. I would look at over.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And but I am super worried about on the other side of the ball, Jackson being out, and you don't have to worry about wind. You are outdoors. It's like the smallest marginal difference with Goff. But if you can get pressure in up the middle and just in general on Goff, and then you're dropping guys into coverage, which I think the Niners will likely be able to do here, then Goff can turn into a pumpkin in an instant. And a lot of times he doesn't get out of it. Maybe for like 2 quarters, he'll be in this pumpkin trance. So that's what I would worry about. And then, if that's the case, then it's the under, it's San Francisco. So I think that what the Lions have to do here is, their run defense has to come to play. Obviously, it would help if Debo's out. And they're gonna have to score with San Francisco.
You gotta run.
You're gonna have to run. You have to hope that Purdy has an off game. I think would help. But if not, you're gonna have to run. I think, and you got to run to the outside against San Fran.
I was just thinking. So big Jahmyr Gibbs game.
Gibbs has to have a huge day, and then you take those defensive linemen, and especially you want to run even more outside now because you don't have Jackson there. And then you take those defensive linemen instead of just, all right, we're pinning our ears back and getting after the quarterback. Then they have to start to play the run more. And then it's going to give opportunities for Goff to have a cleaner pocket, to throw off play action. And then there are some matchups that you can take advantage of against San Francisco on the back end, because Detroit does have a lot of talent. So getting Gibbs going early is, I think, the key to the game. For now, obviously they're gonna have to come up with stops, but at least for them to keep up, that's the key to it. Because if they can't get Gibbs going, they can't get the run game going on known passing downs with their offensive line injuries, it could end up leading to disaster. So a lot is on Gibbs here, and breaking some runs, getting him into manageable third down situations, and not putting Goff into straight drop back third down known passing downs when then that's probably going to be some mistakes, and then it's probably a good night for Detroit, especially if Debo plays and Purdy has a clean game.
Yeah, and another thing that I think is working against Detroit in this spot offensively is that when you look at the 49er defense and coverage, and I think we both agree, and it's probably what's going to happen is that they're not going to blitz very much. I think they were bottom 3 in blitz rate this year, and they're still getting pressure. So they're probably going to drop 7 into coverage. Now, Goff is very methodical, but Ward is going to be on the outside. He's going to take away. Usually, Reynolds is the guy that winds up, on his side.
Yeah.
Then you have, Lenore in the slot has been pretty good, and you're obviously probably going to even give him extra help on Amon-Ra, and because you're gonna have 7 in coverage, and then you have all these linebackers, that can, like Laporta. It's going to be tougher than it usually is for him, so he's not necessarily going to be the safety blanket that he's been, for much of the year. What did he catch? Like 8 balls last game. Now you're going up against Warner and all these linebackers. So like that's not an easy throw. So really the only guy.
And do you need him to chip? Do you need him to chip more? Especially if you're more worried about your interior too.
Yeah, because I was actually, and this is another big thing. We didn't even mention this, but so it's not just Jonah Jackson. The Detroit Lions don't have a second tight end right now that can block.
Yeah.
They lost Brock Wright. He's doubtful.
Out, yeah.
Laporta is your pass catching guy. I mean, he can block, but like if you were saying, okay, let's try to go heavy and just pound the ball,
you would go right
and keep the game close. But you don't. Yeah, you would go right or James Mitchell. Both of those guys are out. But you're like even worse. Your backup tight ends are Anthony Ferkser and Zach Ertz. Ferkser is essentially a wide receiver, like his body type. He's not a blocker. And we know Zach Ertz ain't a blocker either, especially at this stage of his career. And now they're talking about he might not even play this week. He just got to Detroit, I'm obviously going to San Francisco. But so that's an issue. So now you would probably have to use Kabinda, right? The fullback, or Malcolm Rodriguez. But like that, I feel like kind of telegraphs what you're going to do, because you don't want to just have a fullback on the field, like half the snaps. But you also don't want to, like every time he's on the field, you run. So that's working against Detroit. And then back to the coverage, I think the guy you would target on the 49ers is Ambry Thomas. He gave up 5 catches on 5 targets for 74 yards last game. He's going to go up against Jameson Williams. Now, can Jameson Williams beat him? Absolutely. But will Goff have enough time for Jameson Williams' routes to develop? Number one. And number two, is Goff even going to be willing to look for him? Because we know Goff, he likes to look middle, short to intermediate in terms of his reads. That's why Amon-Ra and Laporta, clean up, and Gibbs as well. So like everything in terms of Detroit's offense with these injuries, like not even to just Jackson, but to Wright and the way they match up with this Niner defense, not good. So
yeah, and that also leads into my Armstead prop in that if you have Laporta out running routes, which you're going to want a bunch, right? You don't want him blocking the whole game. Then you're going to have, and the Lions have good tackles, but you're going to have Bosa, one-on-one, right? Even Young one-on-one, and they're gonna win. Not gonna win every time, but they're gonna win. And they're, even if they don't get the Goff, they're gonna force Goff up, and that's when, against the injured interior, you're gonna have guys like Armstead, Hargrave, just you don't have to do much. Like they'll just be able to, Goff will like fall into them and go down. So yeah, that's a really fascinating point in that how is Detroit going to handle, chipping and what they do with Laporta due to the lack of tight end depth that they have. So yeah, there's good, fascinating chess matches in both games. And the other thing that we didn't even mention that we have to mention is this is like, if you wanted to take, so we're talking about a lot of uncertainty. So if you wanted to take the Lions money line, I'm fine with it. But what you want a money line dog is uncertainty. So we're talking about it with the injuries, but you also have Dan Campbell. So he's going to introduce, and you would hope and assume that this is when he would be even more aggressive, right? You're a touchdown underdog. We saw him do it in Dallas. And you would hope that he's going to be ultra aggressive here. If it's, 4th and 8 at the 50, go for it. Who cares? You're 7-point dogs. I mean, obviously you want to take other things into account, how the game's going, but that'll introduce even more variance into this game. So yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty. We're recording this on Wednesday with the injuries, but because of all that uncertainty, at the end of the day, if you wanted to take Detroit money line and then just know that Campbell's going to YOLO it a bunch on 4th downs, I couldn't fault you. So like, even though I think San Fran wins, I think Baltimore wins. If you say I'm taking Kansas City, it's not the greatest quarterback on the planet, and then you say I'm taking Detroit money line because I have Campbell and all of this variance, this uncertainty, I couldn't blame you. You got to remember, these are 2 football games. We usually have 15 a week. So I might be right, you might be wrong. But if you wanted to take that approach on both games, I wouldn't argue with someone. I would say, all right, those are good points. There's different ways to approach a game, and we'll see how it plays out. It's, at the end of the day, it's still an oblong ball.
Yeah. I think I'm still more confident in San Francisco. It's just, I think right now, assuming Debo was in, you would think it's more of like a high scoring game where they can just, ring up points. But I could very well see if Debo's out, like a 26-9 San Francisco win or something like that, So
yeah,
like I'm going to be watching that under. Now that we've kind of talked through it, the more I look at it, I think this has to be a big Jahmyr Gibbs game, because also if you talk about like the chipping and what are you going to do without the tight ends, just get the ball out of Goff hands quick. And who's the best person to do that with? It's probably going to be Gibbs, because Laporte is going to be, running right into Fred Warner and company every time he releases. And then Amon-Ra, with just everyone in coverage, you're probably going to
all those really good linebackers dropping back into zones.
Yeah, it's just going to be a crowded middle of the field. So what you're going to have to do is a lot of screens, a lot of swing passes, things like that, and just let Gibbs go to work. Because, as good as San Francisco's defense is, Gibbs, it has the speed. We saw it last week. We see it every week almost. He can make guys miss. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a big Gibbs game. Maybe not a great Montgomery game, this one. But, that under is one I'll be watching very closely. Because if Debo's out, I think that would be the way to go. Because I think San Francisco too would say, hey, like, we want to. This is how we're gonna, like, Shanahan. Even though he's like an offensive genius, like, he does think about his defense and, like, what positions he's putting them in and whatnot. So I think San Francisco might just say, hey, we got to win like a gritty, ugly one and win with defense. So 51 might be way too high. So yeah, stay tuned. So for the 6-pack. Baltimore KC under 44.5, Flowers under 4.5 catches up to -140, and Armstead over a quarter sack down to +120. I got Baltimore first half -2.5. I would play that anything under 3. Lamar under a half int, so essentially Lamar not to throw a pick. I would play that up to -150, aka 60% odds. And Gus Edwards over 39.5 rushing yards. I would play that up to 43.5. So that is our championship week 6-pack. All right, now what do you got for me?
Predictions on who's winning, and just throw out final scores. I'll go Baltimore 24-17, and I really don't know yet because of the uncertainty, so I'm going to take the most cowardly route ever. San Francisco 29, Detroit 22. Right on the total inside.
I'm going to go, and again, these are predictions. These are not like it's not what my model's saying. I think that Baltimore does it again to Kansas City. It's like almost like it's going to feel like that Super Bowl against the Bucs. I say Baltimore 31, Kansas City 12, and
I'm glad you kept it under.
Yep, and then for the Niners Lions game, I think you're going to get fewer points. That's just, again, gut call, thinking Debo is going to be out. I think you're going to get fewer points. So I'll go Niners 29, 5 Jake Moody field goals. Niners 29, Lions 15. So
wow, someone's got to bet that then. We both are calling for the Niners to score 29 points.
Oh yeah, their team total is 29.5, I believe. So
oh wow,
yeah, because you know how that goes. Like everyone's gonna want to see them because they
Moody
put up 30
missed extra point,
times?
And a Moody missed extra point too. 5 field goals and a missed extra point or something.
Yeah, something, maybe a safety. Who knows? Like, yeah. Something, some kind of maybe not a scoregami, but something ugly for that one. I could definitely see that because it's like total of 51, nice and crisp. Like that line just looks too crispy right now for the game to play out like that. Like 7 with 51, like that's way too clean. And
I will say the one thing I hope most of all, I mean, for anyone who followed the Ravens future, I'm also a Ravens fan. I hope the Ravens win. Hope we hit all our bets as always. And I just hope the refs stay out of it. Had a Bills 50-1, was worried about Hockley. He stayed out of it last week. Refs are going to miss calls. Just don't take over the game. So I was happy that didn't happen. And if the Ravens lose, a good hard-fought game, I will congratulate Chiefs fans. But just don't control the game. We have 3 games left. Just stay out of it. Let them play.
Before we get out of here, this is actually what I want to ask you about. So let's say Ravens win and Niners win, or actually let's just say the Ravens win. What would you make them against San Francisco and Detroit? Like if you had like an early projection, obviously not your sharp one, but just like
I mean, I think right now I make the Ravens like -1.5. I think they could open as a dog if San Fran looks dominant, but I make them -1.5 now on a neutral, and it's also a good matchup. The Lions are also a good matchup for the Ravens. So like the hardest matchup is the Chiefs, just because of the defense they play and schematically, and then obviously the best quarterback on the planet. I actually make the Ravens like I'd be higher in the market on both, I think, but I make the Ravens like 6 versus the Lions.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like a 1.5 against San Fran, and probably like 5 to 6. Well, yeah, like 5 to 6 against Detroit.
Yeah, you might get like, I think the market would open like 4.5. On especially the thing is,
the Ravens blew them out. They might open like minus.
Yeah, they did.
I would guess they opened 6.
I think the look-ahead line was 5, but you have to remember I would actually then come down because if the Lions beat the Niners,
right,
I'd have to upgrade them. So it depends on how bad each one. So that's what I have now. So I don't know. I'll say 5.5, assuming the Lions win, and then 1.5 for the Ravens versus 49ers. And then if it's Chiefs, the Chiefs would get a pretty big bump if they beat the Ravens. I mean, not huge, but it's one game late in the season. But Chiefs would be, I'd have Chiefs about a field goal over the Lions. Both would pull upsets, so I don't think that would change much. And I'd have the Niners about a field goal over the Chiefs. And Ravens, I'm actually at 1. Ravens -1 over the Niners. But I probably would bump the Chiefs. It depends on how they play out, but the Chiefs will show me a lot if they win this game. The Ravens have been that dominant.
Yeah. I mean, and then you also got to, if the underdogs win, it could be because of an injury. Like remember what happened to Purdy last year.
Yeah, there's a lot to decide.
But I'd have the Chiefs about +3 to the Niners, and about -3 to the Lions. So that sounds about right. And now it's time for our coach's pep talk. For this week's pep talk, we're gonna go to the legendary comedian Cat Williams, who's been buzzing lately. His recent interview with Shannon Sharp, and we'll dedicate this to the Ravens. Get it done.
Trampoline skin is something that you ask God for. There's really no such thing as hitting Shannon Sharp so hard that he don't want to run the ball the next play. And if that's your only goal is to hit him so hard that he don't want to be him no more, you just out of luck. Your coach can't help you. There ain't no pep talk gonna help you. Don't matter about the uniform, your cheerleader. None of that matters. If it ever gets to mano-a-mano, may the best man win. And if you've been living your entire life trying to be the best man that you can for yourself, then you should feel great about those odds.
That is a wrap for us. So thank you for listening all season long. If you're new, don't judge us on last week. We're good, I promise. But after this week, we'll be back here with lots of episodes leading up to Super Bowl 58 to have you covered from every angle, including trends, props, bets, of course, our Super Bowl 6-pack. So stay tuned.
Monday of Super Bowl week. You can expect that early Monday, or Sunday 6-pack.
Yep.
Super Bowl.
Yep. So not the normal Wednesday. So we'll probably take we won't have an episode next Wednesday or next Thursday. We'll just drop one that following Monday, the week of the Super Bowl. And we do have episodes with myself and Kerner on the Fantasy Flex and the also the Projection Pod over on this channel. And Stuck is talking college hoops over on the Big Bets on Campus pod every Monday and Friday. Stuck is on X, formerly Twitter, at Stucky2. I'm at Chris Raybon. We're at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this shmoney.
Let go. Go Ravens.